We are back again from the swamp. I am Jen.
I'm Kyle, and we're joined by Leander Kreltszheim. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me
Um,
on.
We don't
yeah,
know what we're getting ourselves into today. Well, at least I don't. Kyle might, but
I have no clue. I'm excited. Leander, tell us a little bit about, well, maybe like a little intro, and then like where we're going today.
Okay. I know a little bit about the first few steps of where we're going, but I have no idea what will happen after that. That's the practice, but I know you're both up for that. And I really think that, you'll each get something from this. I just have no idea what that is. So I'm based here down in Melbourne, Australia. It is the morning time, so thank you for finding a time that works for both of us. I'm on traditional Wurundjeri Woiwurrung land around what we call Naarm, Melbourne. And in terms of who I am at the moment, I'm in transition. So this is a perfect moment and kind of we'll see what happens. But I very much have a social justice, community-based design, social design background. And that's what I sort of continue to do through consultancy, but also doing a amazing PhD at the moment, which allows me to kind of explain or explore what relationality is in this really holistic, embodied way. And what I'm going to share with you today is a part of the research practice. So this has become part of my kind of everyday practice as well, but it very much started as a research practice exploring how we might be in relationship with water and discomfort and notice agency in things outside of ourselves. So I thought what I'd do today, when you invited me, for everyone else, I said, can we please watercolor? Because I think that's a bit more of a rich way of getting into the conversation, but also like many things that you always explore, it's what we do and how we feel in the moment rather than what I can possibly tell you via words.
I love
love
it.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm one of those people. The discomfort's here. I'm one of those people that when I'm teeing up a workshop, I will say we're going to do some drawing, and nobody is going to draw worse than me. And here's an example of that. Like here's me drawing a clock, and it's awful. So I'm that guy.
Wait, really?
But I can lean into that. Oh, I am absolutely. I have no visual art
I
skills.
don't. I'm not
That
I'm not good at art. At drawing either, but this is interesting. We've already uncovered something.
I know, I love that. What I will say is that you don't need to be. It's not about that at all, and very much you'll notice all the metaphors of what you can learn about yourself and these sorts of things as you do it. And one of the first things is I have no intention of teaching you anything about art. Maybe like letting you develop a relationship with the materials that will help people become an artist, but it's very much not about what the end product is. It's very much about the process, the pause that we often don't have time for, and what you notice on the paper and in yourselves, in your bodies as well. So everyone can do that, and people might be a little bit reticent, and I have a lot of people who come to me with conversations about their art teacher from high school that traumatized them, but it's really just about what you bring to the practice. Do you want to jump in?
No, no. I'm just loading up all these thoughts and reflections. So, but I want you
Oh, okay.
to take it away.
And I've got to ask, I didn't ask you before this, but do you all have water in jars? Okay, beautiful, because
Yeah, I
that's
was
kind
gonna
of...
say, who's gonna be the first one who like didn't follow the instructions, which
That's right.
we were given in advance, which for the listeners were relatively lightweight. So I have water,
Yeah.
and I
I think
think what I
water's
need.
anything you need, which is perhaps the first metaphor that we'll go with. Um,
Love it.
but even I am going with a bit of discomfort in that one of my beautiful friends down here gifted me a new palette. And so I don't know what the relationship with these paints will be. I don't know how they'll react with the pigment, with the paper, and I've got different papers as well. So I'm ready to explore that. What I'm going to do is kind of start how I start everything, which is maybe just ask you to take like just a few deep breaths. Just into your belly in your own time, 3 breaths. And then I'll ask you to choose any of the paintbrushes you have, possibly one of the larger ones you have. I know everyone will have different tools at their disposal. Metaphor number 2. I'm not going to keep doing that throughout the whole thing, by the way.
Be my guest. We will tag this in YouTube on YouTube with where the metaphors are, so you can fast forward to them.
The other thing that somebody usually does as well is they put their paintbrush in their coffee at some stage as well. That's fine. We'll just go with that. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just get a bit of water and start playing with whatever colour you want. But get a fair amount of water onto that brush if you can. So there'll be different ways that you play with it. You might have a palette that you can put some water in and make a bit more of a wash. But we just don't want dry paint at the moment because we're really seeing about what the water does.
It's occurring to me as we do this that, like, our poor viewers are going to just see the three of us like this the whole time. There'll be such good tension and, like, you know, kind of anticipation of whether they'll get to see anything happening. Viewers, I could be faking this right now. You know what I'm doing with my hands.
I'm miming the watercolor painting. Yeah.
Yes, well, Kyle's always been AI anyway, so it's fine. So yeah.
That's right. Yes, I am a code. So I'll generate this in a moment.
I've started doing this online only in the last few months. So after like a few years of doing this in person, which has its definite advantages, I've started doing this online. So I'm just going to show you that I'm just doing a big blob. But there's a bit of water, so it flows around. But just notice what it does. That's the first bit.
I've got my kids' art supplies, and so yeah, like just one of these that like probably came from Target or something, and I figure my kids do awesome stuff that we hang on the refrigerator all the time. I'm sure I can come up with something halfway. It's not about if it's decent or not, but if they can get.
You're already putting like a judgment, like a teleological kind of
You're right.
End up at a worthy place. Well, fuck that, man.
What is this? This is telling already. I'm on the couch. This is no. It's if they can get this end of the brush onto the paper and color can come out on the other side, I think I can swing it. I am going to make a mess though. We will be in competition between me and my 6-year-old who makes the bigger mess, and I cannot. We'll see by the end of the night what this looks like.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to put you in competition with your 6-year-old as a part of this, but it's also about your choice and agency. Okay, so we've got a bit of water on there, and paint and pigment, and really I did start this practice as a way of trying to show to people how I see systems working together, and that the relationship is not just between me and the art, but watercolor's a great medium for showing you the relationship between the paper and the brush will make a difference, and the pigment will make a difference, which is why it doesn't matter if you've got kids' paints, but you can compare that to better quality artists' pigments or whatever, so you can compare them and notice the difference, but there's not necessarily a hierarchy in there. Okay, do you want to lift up a little bit and kind of show what you've got?
Interesting that you and I went with very close colors, and that, Kyle, you have a green in there too. I also have like a super cheapy kit that I don't even remember where it came from. There was probably back during COVID, like back when I was working at an agency, we probably did a remote, like everybody paint kind of day. Like I think that might be why I have this, because I don't remember where this came from. But I am already, like the pigment is like balling up, and I am definitely like, come on, man. And then I'm like, all right, you're welcome. You can stay. Stupid little like rolls of stuff, you know? So I'm like already having to be like, man.
And you're just noticing that, right? That's all it is you're kind of noticing, accepting. And I don't know if the balls are from the pigment or from the paper. Is that possible?
Yeah, I was kind of checking it out, and I don't know how deep we want to get into this, but yeah, my first instinct was like, I want to get rid of those, right? Like I was literally like, I want to get rid of those. And I was like, I can't tell if it's the pigment or the paper. Now that I'm fussing with it, I do think it's the pigment, like it's balled up. And then I'm like, all right, well, if that's what the paint wants to do, it can do it. If it was the paper, I was ready to be like, okay, we're switching to a new piece. Like I've had enough. So there metaphors for folks who want to.
But also, just in that moment, like, there's so many, like, it's just noticing your options and what you do with that. I'm not going to tell you what to do with that. Like, if I was teaching you art, there might be ways to remedy that. Yeah, tricks and things, but it's just noticing. Okay, so on that same piece of paper, if you clean your brush and get another colour, so something kind of distinct. Or distinctive. Distinct?
Mm.
I can't remember. Okay, that's something for
Distinct,
me to Google
I think.
later.
Yeah.
And then, what happens if you draw another blob that kind of overlaps with those first blobs? Blobs, lines, you can also just kind of play with what the brush wants to do and what you can do with those materials. So then I've got, I don't think this is going to go everywhere, but I do have a sheet down. I've got the way that they meet each other. Ooh. Sorry, I just got excited by my own. Yeah, I still get excited. And these are different pigments for me, so I'm loving them as well.
Interesting. That is gorgeous. And
so just noticing what happens in between. So I use this, and this originally came into my practice as part of the PhD to kind of just show people my thinking, because a lot of my work is about decolonization and how do we take notice of the kind of things that we think about in design, which are very much, productivity and efficiency and hierarchy and all those sorts of things that come from that colonial modernist sort of mindset. How does that come up in how we represent things and how we think about things, and lovely Venn diagrams or linear models which help us understand something but reduce something as well. So like when I think about, I should have showed you this when I introduced myself and this conversation, because in reality a lot of stuff looks like this. And when we're talking about complexity, this isn't like a definite diagram of it, but you start to be able to show how things come together, and that's okay. And I think that's what I'm seeing in front of me is how I feel about all of the conversations and the work that I do. And when I put that in front of someone and point at a specific part of it that doesn't have a specific boundary, and this bit here is like infinite colours between two colours which are opposite on a colour wheel, they're complementary colours, it starts to explain something that we haven't been able to explain via the kinds of ways that we're talking about, talking about complex systems.
There was a...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's... I remember in just about every conversation I was getting into, maybe 2 years ago or so, everybody had to mention it's not the biome or the ecosystem, it's where two biomes start to interlace. It's the in-between space of where they meet. I kind of got sick of that because everybody had to regurgitate it in every conversation. This is a refreshing look at that same idea.
Yeah,
Jen, what were you going to say?
I was just going to ask, because it strikes me how much similarity any type of activity has the potential to have, where you're asking somebody, basically the way you framed it up, right? You're like, I'm not teaching you something. Our goal here isn't to learn a skill or a technique. It's just to notice. And, it's cultivating, I guess, like a little bit of a habit of noticing or attention or whatever you'd like to think about it as. And it strikes me, and you said, Kyle, at the beginning too, you were like, when I do a workshop, I'm going to ask people to draw. Like you try to like preemptively assuage any of that concern or the terror of a blank page, right? And there's all kind of like little enabling constraints you can put into activities so that people aren't starting with a blank slate. But I'm curious, Leander, and you're doing this with other people. What do you see as far as like the spectrum of people who are afraid to put their brush in the water to even start, people who are really trying to like quote do it right even though we haven't even allowed for what right is, versus people who are like, I'm often doing something crazy and different, and I'm not even being told what to do. Like, what do you generally see in even these first few steps of the process, like the spectrum of people and how they respond to this?
Oh gosh, so much comes to mind. I think the first thing to notice, and this is something I've learnt from the practice about a lot of things I do, is this idea of readiness, is that people have to opt into this practice. So I'm asking them, are you happy to do that? I've never done it with somebody and forced them to do it. Like that's kind of obvious, but it's also kind of important to sort of note that people have opted in, whether they are artists who love watercolor and want to do a watercolor, and there are pros and cons of that, or whether it's somebody who wants to try something different and they just like the description of what I've spoken about, but they are hesitant. There's some level of readiness, which is kind of how I work with people. I'm not trying to shift everyone's mindsets about things. There needs to be a level of readiness, and then I kind of meet them where they're at. So it depends on whether it's one-on-one, or whether like it's part of a group. I haven't done many large groups because I don't get to have that one-on-one attention to how they're feeling and how they're arriving at it. So that's kind of part of it. Like, about 4 or 5 people in a group is actually quite nice for me to be able to respond to how ready they are. The other thing is that I think, and I can't know this, but there has to be a level of trust in me. So I think, I think to a few people who have been the most hesitant, and either they've just gone, I'm ready and I'm going to dive into this, or I'm worried about this for a number of reasons, but I trust you enough to just go with you on it. And it is low stakes. When I kind of thought about this practice, I've really got to go back and think about how this came about, because it came through like not just one linear thing, but 12 things coagulating at once. But I was like, how do I get 15 traumatized people in a room and help them deal with their nervous system? And I was like, well, okay, straight away, not going to do that. Not even going to bring somebody else in who's more qualified to do that.
Yeah.
But because this is a lot about nervous system, I was like, I already have this practice with watercolors. It explains a lot of things. And then I just started doing it with one person, and then I did it with 2 or 3 people, and I realized I couldn't, what came about from those engagements wasn't always the same thing. So I just kind of put it in front of more and more people and went, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to paint. But one example is somebody who came along to a public workshop, so they didn't know me very well. And they had somebody else who I think they were really like in their team, but they were, again, felt quite safe to do it as a bit of a team bonding thing. But they were the leader, and they are very like self-professed project manager, need to control things, all that sort of stuff. But they just sort of talked it through, and we had enough of a setup in a small group for them to own that. And then at times when... so this is the magical thing that we won't get to do, is actually draw on the same space and go, what does it mean to share space, and explore this on the page. But that did kind of, test their comfort a bit. But it was also, number one, low stakes. Everybody else was like, it doesn't matter how you show up, it's fine. It's just putting a line down and exploring it. But also, they don't have to do it. The pause is also kind of about going, if this brings you discomfort and you want some sort of certainty, talk about that. That's fine. And so their thing was, when we did the group activity, they were like, can we have some rules at the beginning? And I was like, that's not up to me. So we discussed it as a group, and then the group decided in that case what were the kind of rules about, could you draw on somebody else's bit, or did you need permission, or can you just like do a big splat, or what happens if I get a big black marker and just go through the middle of it? And I was like, it all goes, but when that happens, how do we respond to it? That's the key thing. It creates that kind of low stakes, low risk area for that. Before we go on, can I ask you to do one more thing? So hold on to that question. But before your water gets too muddled, it's fine if it is, can I get you to clean your brush? I'm just going to develop your relationship with the watercolor over here. And just put some clear water across your page in any kind of It can be just a little blob or just coat the paper a bit. And then go back to what you were doing with coloured pigment, but onto the wet page. And maybe just explore that relationship a bit of what it means when you have wet paint on wet paper. And Kyle, were you going to ask a question before I rudely interrupted?
No, not at all. I was. You know what I'm noticing already is that it's so much easier for me to listen while I'm doing this. I'm usually trying to think, all right, what do I want to pick up on here? What am I going to note? What am I going to ask about? What am I going to dig into? And then I realize, shit, I've missed a few things here. I'm starting to like decouple from the conversation a bit. That's not the case now. Although I'm losing my questions, that's kind of okay. I'm kind of just like in it at the moment. So that's the first thing I'm noticing.
It's funny because I usually doodle when if I'm in a meeting or conversation
Really?
for the exact reason. Like Kyle, when you and I are doing like just the two of us on these, if people see me like kind of, I'm not always taking copious notes, guys. You should see the doodles I'm creating. You know, the like, but yeah, it's. I'm even finding that now. I shouldn't feel surprised, but it's certainly like, yeah, I am obviously receiving with ease, with relative ease, you know, whereas I didn't know coming in if choosing to engage in an activity that is not something I do really ever, if it was going to feel like a new activity that needs my like working memory, or if it would feel, you know, more embodied such that it frees up the working memory and the cognitive. So it's definitely the latter. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Now I want, when we're doing that, when you're doodling at the end, like the grand reveal.
Yeah, I can start doing that if you want.
Here are the sketch notes from our conversation.
Sometimes they're really like, you know, they're just boring little loops, you know what I mean? Something like that. And sometimes it's some kind of grand thing. I will say as an aside, and it's actually really pleasant that this is like reminding me or kind of bringing me to a similar place. When I was when I did grad school, even though I did like experience design, you know, we did, like I said, we didn't do a lot of visuals because it wasn't really critical to well, we did a lot of visual design, but it wasn't drawing. But I took a drawing class as an elective, you know, and I thought it would be largely functional for me to just get a little bit more at ease with sketching for the act of supporting a design practice. And I already did it and was comfortable with it, but I just thought it would be interesting to see what I could advance in my craft. And the fellow who taught it, we did get to that, like in the last maybe quarter of the semester. But the whole like beginning of the semester, I mean, we started with just a Bic pen, a cheap Bic pen, and a big piece of paper. And we did stuff with that for like the first at least half of a semester. And it was, you know, a lot of probably the same kinds of things we might explore here in this setting and any others, but it was, what struck me wasn't like that it took a little while to develop the relationship between your hand and the pen and the paper, even though it was a cheapy throwaway, you know, Bic pen or whatever. But that I didn't expect to come to a point where I would see what we were producing as beautiful, because I thought it was like an exercise. And then like at a certain point, he showed us some of his notebooks full of things he made with like, you know, chewed off like plastic pens on like cheap paper, and we were breathtaking. Like it was. So anyway, to that end, it's all this is basically conjuring memories of that for me in a lovely way, because I have thought in the last few weeks about how I wouldn't mind getting back into a practice of doing that, like with the big pen and the big piece of paper. I already do it a little bit when I'm doodling, but it's not quite the same. So this may be the impetus for me on that one.
Yeah. And just notice that you have a few decisions. And again, is it about creating something beautiful? Is it about just like whatever you come up with today? Do you just hang on to the state that it's created for you and throw this out? Like some people will want to keep the thing, but very few people want to keep it. So I do have a practice where I let them focus on a part of the whole and a part that really speaks to them about something, and they cut that bit out. And sometimes that's a meaningful thing to take away as a bit of a reminder. But overall, I have all these discarded pieces of paper of something that doesn't look particularly beautiful, but because that's not the practice that I offer, it just kind of is what it is. But over time, yeah, Jan, if you keep kind of doing this, you'll have a different relationship with the paper, with the paints, You might want to start playing with kind of, different materials, all that sort of stuff, but there is also something that the water brings to this practice that the Bic pen won't.
Yes.
Which I thought would interest both of you, given the idea of complex systems and complexity in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually I was going to say earlier too, and Kyle, you started to head this direction, and it is a conversation we have frequently, not just on here, but with people in our respective intellectual communities, whatever that means, about the ways in which we seek to express and communicate complexity, and every once in a while there's a conversation where people are in search of a new metaphor or a new example or a game we can play, or you know what I mean. So this one I'm looking through the camera out at the viewers or the listeners who, if you've not thought about this before, guys, come on in, because there's a lot to be explored here with, I guess, on that front, we'll put it that way, for everybody who's had enough of their improv or their games or their other activities. Get the watercolor palette out, maybe call Leander.
Yeah.
And what are you noticing that's different that this might bring to your practice or your understanding, or just a different way of playing with what complexity might look like or feel like?
I'm definitely what I'm struck by right now is that a lot of the types of, quote, things we might do, activities, practices, whatever they are, again, are usually in the service of something communicative, or we're trying to give someone else the opportunity to have that experience. And you kind of almost end up in one of two places where, say you're doing a Lego serious play or other types of generative hands-on making activities that are meant to do a lot of different things, but they usually have a goal. They usually have a purpose, which is to give people a channel or an opportunity to communicate a thing or to recognize a thing or to share a thing. And then you get at the other end of the spectrum, very maybe esoteric and a little out there practices, more embodied stuff, movement, whatever it might, somatic stuff, where you might just have people sitting around, doing things purely with their bodies. And I think that's really scary for a lot of people, depending on what environment you're in. So I'm finding this is interestingly kind of in the middle in a nice way, splitting the difference between being probably a little less uncomfortable than some of the more out there things, because probably everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who's maybe touched a watercolor kit before. But it doesn't lock us into, we're doing a workshop, we're going to come up with a principle at the end and some actions, right? So there's by putting a brush in someone's hand and have the paper be blank and not have it be, tell me a story with your painting, or that kind of thing, that's a choice you're making as the facilitator. It's not just wrapped up in the tools. You're making a very deliberate choice on what to facilitate and what not to. And so I'm just taking notice of that because I think that is interesting.
Yeah, and definitely those other steps are the add-on bits. So
yes, I can imagine there's plenty of power in doing so, but it's not a given is kind of what's neat to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm always trying to think of those metaphors. How can I relate to people and connect and validate that sense of overwhelm with complexity or familiarity with, tap into that familiarity with complexity. But I'm always sensitive to, this is my explanation. This is my way of making sense of this. You're listening to me explain what complexity is to me. No matter how ambiguous I try to make it, it's still sourced from me. This is, I'm always looking for a sort of practice that lets people sort of get their hands on it and kind of go, yeah, this is what squishy feels like. This is what ambiguity looks like or feels like. This is a really interesting way of tapping into that. And even if it is I'm sitting down and I'm in a group of my peers and I have some discomfort about making something that might embarrass me and I don't want to show it to people. Again, there's so much to tap into there to say, yes, complexity. Let's tell me more, express that. Yeah, I don't. Here's my question, because this is probably the last time I did any watercolors. It was about the time my son's age. I was like, this was like elementary school art class. Is this something that you have been doing and you made this connection, or did you get into the complexity in the systems and the having the conversations and then say, I'm going to find watercolor and introduce that? What came first? Which chicken, which egg?
So if you want a linear understanding of it, I can't give you that. My journey pretty much looked like this. So I've been writing about this. Like, I'm using autoethnography to kind of share that experience over time, and there are so many things that came together. Number one, I have always had watercolors, and I've got, through my mother's lineage, art has just always been a part of what we've done and seen, but not necessarily watercolor. And definitely I've written and tried to kind of remember being introduced to watercolor in high school, and my teacher saying, let the water do the work, and me saying, I hate this, I can't control it, I don't like this, I'm going to paint with acrylics. So that kind of, I left that there. And then I did kind of come to play with it maybe in the last 10, 15 years again. And again, as a, I can't even remember, because I don't feel like I can draw amazing pictures of boats or people or all that sort of stuff or anything like that with this. And that's the next stage, maybe somewhere down the line. But I definitely used it for play and depicting something, but it was always kind of quite abstract. And then a few things came up together in the last few years. One of them was I'm doing these very kind of trying to figure out what a relational interview looks like if it's not, that kind of traditional extractive kind of model. And there's this amazing Aboriginal Chinese friend that I have that was bringing in her lineage and all her information together, and I kind of wanted to share this with her as well. And she's an artist, and I thought this would be a lovely way to just chat. And so that pinged in my head. Another friend that I have who knows a lot about co-design, I asked her, what would make this research journey valuable to you? And for her, it was like to be able to play, because she doesn't have the time to do that. But if I could bring that to it, so that pinged. This idea of me trying to represent all these elements coming together and having a relationship beyond me, that pinged. And then the last thing I think that came in like the first year was trying to, visualize, or even just trying to write about my conceptual theoretical framework and figuring out what the heck that means, and bringing all these different things together that make up my practice. And then going, I don't know how to write about this. So I turned to like coloured pencils and tried to draw it, and that really helped. And this kind of felt sense that precedes trying to like actually put things into words, that process helped. But I still found that little diagram where I just have a note going, this would work better in watercolours. And so I tried in watercolors because I knew what would happen, because I do have that relationship with that, what you're seeing right now on the page. It really encapsulated what I was trying to tie together in words. And then at the end of first year, we have like a milestone where we present and essentially say, do I have a PhD or not? And I did these big paintings to try and show them what I was thinking and feeling that I couldn't put in words. And the little thing I did was I brought paints and paper for everyone in the room, and I invited a lot of external people that were related to the research, but I didn't think about that. I just went, I think at the time I thought, if I bring paper and paints, they won't look at me while I'm presenting. That's the first thing that really occurred to me. They said exactly what you did, Kyle, which was they got to focus more on what I was saying by having something to do with their hands. And that that was something that I didn't know about and I didn't think about. And I've got that same practice of writing notes and doodling and that sort of thing, but I hadn't thought about why I do it. But yeah, so all of those things came together, and then I was just like, I'm going to just keep playing with this. And then it led me down this path of looking at water and relationality, and just trying this in so many different contexts and different continents. And I've gone to different countries and on it, and different groups of people, but different numbers of people. And obviously now I'm starting to do it online and see, what does it mean if I can't see what you're doing and you can't see what each other is doing. So that's a long answer, but I did précis that with this picture. So that's how it all came together. And I think that's how it does come together, if you allow it to come together and go, it's not going to be neat and it's going to be messy. And at the end of this journey, for the thesis at least, I've got to tie this up in some way that's enough of a story to communicate, but also go, it doesn't need to be neat, and I'm not going to have this wonderful framework of how to do this, because what I do with everyone will be different, and if somebody else does this practice with somebody else, it's going to be different. So I would say the water kind of came to me, but it's always kind of been there, and it's very much about what do I bring to this kind of discussion over time. And I think like the art and the embodied sense is kind of key to kind of what I bring.
Do you ever find... Do you ever find... So, because like my brain is... I mean, I love metaphors, and I think in like 18 metaphors at once. So, usually if I'm only mentioning 3, it's because I've exercised some level of filter for everyone else's benefit.
I know that.
But I can tell that we're on that wavelength. And then on top of that, like, it's really kind of interesting to think about the metaphors on top of metaphors in the practice here, and the role of water and the paper, not just the nature of the paper and its presence, but like its texture, that kind of stuff, qualities of the paper in like many forms of the word quality, the tools, everything. You could start to like basically make this list. And Kyle, I'm thinking of like affordance mapping or something, right? Like, like, do people? This is maybe not even I don't know if it's an interesting question. Maybe it's just an observation with a question mark on the end. But like, I could feel people who know a little about complexity. It could almost be a danger in that it's a little bit tempting to start to think about the metaphors of everything I'm working with as actants in the system, as constraints, as affordances, and kind of wanting to figure out a picture that they make together. Okay, the water represents this, and the blah, 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 blah. And, it's, as I'm noticing that, like, I don't feel myself tempted to do that, but largely because I've made a point in my life to not let that muscle get too strong. But I wonder if, that is a danger, that if you're working with people who are, for example, familiar with or work in any kind of systems oriented, and I don't even mean just complexity, but any kind of systems or structural, I can imagine community work of almost any kind this hits on. Is that a challenge? Does that come up? Is that, especially as you've done this with different groups of people, do you find that the temptation or the slippery slope to over-intellectualize what's happening more or less present, and is that a problem in the practice in your mind, or is that just part of something else to notice? Does this make sense? Like, I don't know, there's not really a question here, but
I think it's a really fascinating question and something that I can't completely answer, and I think you know that, but also I think that's exactly where I'm at the moment, where I'm starting to realize it's not just a practice for me, and taking it out and going, what happens if you layer this on top of other people's practices? So it's not just a practice in itself, and taking out to people who are in the middle of some sort of project and going, what does this add to the way you are approaching what you're doing at the moment, and asking them. And I think what you're talking about is exactly the next step, and a really good thing to kind of be aware of, but I don't really know at the moment. Like, I am probably a bit too stuck in the metaphors. What I'm trying to do is not force the metaphors onto people.
Yeah.
And definitely as I start writing this up for a thesis, it's going to be like, how do I hold space for it to still kind of just be without trying to tie it down too much? Mm-hmm. But that's exactly where I am at the moment. I'll be honest. I'm really interested in your thoughts on what the potential, not disadvantages is the wrong word, but how it can be used in ways that, just the risks of it.
Yeah, that's a good question because even I mean, there's my own lens on it that would even use a word like a risk or a danger.
Yeah, I know.
But again, speaking mostly as Jen, right? And I could see a younger version of myself engaged in this type of activity with your facilitation and really taking a lot of delight, which is not a problem, but really taking a lot of delight in like mentally cataloging all the ways that like what water represents in like an organizational setting if I'm working in like or complexity or whatever it might be, and then thinking about, well, the brushes could represent like this part, the team or the tools that are available, or you know what I mean. And I could see myself kind of almost in a little bit of too much of a downhill frictionless way, letting the brain wander right down into, let me create a fun little catalog of what each of the pieces of this are metaphors for, and
Yeah.
give myself permission to hang out in the metaphor and be not really in maybe a relationship with like the literal physical stuff I'm doing. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of what I mean, but I don't know that I would call that a risk or a danger.
Yeah.
It's something that I would say that where I'm in my life and practice now is that I take more pleasure in sort of pumping the brakes on that and just being in the physical part of it. There's plenty of metaphors and catalogs to be done that have been done and will be done in the future, but that's kind of the piece that, it just comes to mind because there are people who I know who will do exactly what I would do in that way. And it always raises the question of, as a facilitator, let them do it, obviously. Like that's what they need to do. That's what they need to do. But where that intersects with the other goals of, the practice that you're developing, just interesting. I don't know. So hopefully that helps at least a little bit explain too what I mean by the risk or the danger.
Yeah, no, it does, and I knew at the time that risk is the wrong word, but something to be aware of or to notice. What comes up for me is that I think I'm still sitting in that myself, in that trying to write this up. I'm like, I don't want to do any of those things. So,
Yeah.
and you're kind of helping me to notice that right now because I'm not quite in the middle of it, but I'm aware that as much as there is at first sight a metaphor, like there are so many different layers of this to bring them all together, like it wouldn't work. And so
Yeah.
is there just a way I can talk about all the things that it might hold for people? And not even for people, for me. Like, what are the things that this practice has brought me in this process of decolonizing, in this process of just kind of wanting to know, in this process of research? So, like, this is kind of also about the research and how I'm in relationship with the research or words or whatever. So I keep coming back to how it can highlight something for me that I wouldn't otherwise know, but not tie it down too much. I think that's the first thing that I've noticed. But again, that's more about my practice, and I haven't thought about what that means for facilitating other people. But what does come up in the facilitation with other people is that we move through the metaphor without holding onto it too tightly into the embodied part of it. So that's a really good thing for me to reflect on how consciously I do that or how intuitively I do that and how it's shifted over months and months. But it facilitates the discussion. So like we have done today, it's facilitated a discussion where you can almost just like cut out the watercolor in the end and the discussion holds, or what you've taken from the discussion holds, and it'll be different for both of you, and it won't be anything that I could have said to you 45 minutes ago or whatever it is. And that's also the felt sense of it. So I very much didn't want to talk to you about this. I wanted you to experience it. And in the first few months of this, I was like, I have a metaphor. I love how all of these things have a relationship with each other. Hey, everyone, feel the metaphor. And then I just
let it wash over you.
I know you're noticing this and this and this, but that's not the point. This is the point. and so that was 100% something that I had to go through and let go of and find something even more beautiful, which is holding this space and seeing what comes up for people and walking alongside them, but not telling them where that they needed to get to. That's kind of part of it. But yeah, in reflecting on how other people use it. I'm kind of watching and seeing that, but no idea where it will go for people as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a completely different purpose and practice than, say, some of the different forms of generative, Kyle, just excuse the term, participatory design, co-design, whichever of the words we want to use. But, when you have folks in a room together and people are doing something with their hands, even in the past, when it was framed around use these materials to make a fantasy object that, it's in a product design process kind of situation. For me, it always struck me, and this was partly because I was lucky enough to work with people in a company and a team where it was okay that we didn't follow some really rigid, like, no, they have to produce like a fun little prototype and then talk about the characteristics of the product they want. It was really a lot more like, it's fine if all that happens is having stuff in front of them like pipe cleaners and Legos lets them start doing shit with their hands so that exactly what we're talking about right now starts happening. And that was literally always what the value of it was.
Awesome.
And yeah, so like that, it's interesting. I did not expect those dots to connect here, but they certainly are, and it's making me realize that throughout my like design career, the places where we've done those things, someone might have compared it more to certain other forms of co-design activities. It was really a lot more just about giving people that sort of space to do something with their hands and their body in a way that felt, you said earlier, very low stakes. I mean, that's so key. It's so key that folks feel like it's fine to have what I'm making be bad and worthless. And then once that trust and that belief that it's okay for that to be the case is there, yeah.
Can I ask you both a question? Like, when we're comparing this to other PD tools or whatever it is, what do you think the water affords in this? Like, say if this was different from the Bic drawing or just using acrylic paints, for example, just painting in general, or finger painting or whatever it is. And you can finger paint here, by the way. I'm not saying no to that. But what do you think having this water material affords that might be a bit different, just in your experience today? Or not?
I'm already seeing, not that I came in here with some sort of real intention of this is what I'm going to make and this is what's going to come out the other side, but my expectation of looking at the paint in the box and then getting it on the paper was very different. What it looks like in this palette and then how it hit the page, very, very different. And it became pretty obvious that there's... it's a push-pull sort of relationship I've got right now with the watercolors, where I don't know if when I switch colors or I switch the brush or I change an angle or I stay on a certain area or move through it, it's doing completely different things. And so I'm now responding to it. We're dancing, and I don't know that that's something that we try to explain is going to happen to people, because we're usually in those conversations of, can you build me the 6-month roadmap, and can you write your KPIs and tell us the outcomes, can make some commitments. Just thinking through that while going through this, actually with a brush in hand, I see this a softening on that. I see that there's that expectation of like, this should be easy. I've got blank paper and I've got paint. It should do exactly what I want it to do, and even that is not happening. And yeah, I don't know that I could explain that better than actually just doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you said that. I mean, for me, the water adds, so everything Kyle said, yes, and it adds an unpredictability to, it's a layer of abstraction between me and the paper that I can't really get around. I guess I could get away with it, just jam my brush into some of the dry pigment and slap it on there, right? Or use a different form of paint. But it adds a layer of obliqueness or indirectness, a layer of something between me and it, which then also introduces that uncertainty, right? Whatever, metaphors about complexity abound. But what's interesting is I find that really like, okay, this is like a lovely opportunity to do everything Kyle's just said, which is I'm not trying to master the pigment, the water, or the paper. I'm just trying to kind of like see what it does and respond to it. And it's a recursive kind of reciprocal thing that's happening. And the unpredictability of the water, or maybe not even, it's not like it's totally unpredictable, but if you load up a bunch of water and you don't know what it's going to do, and that's kind of lovely, but it also maybe is, again, terrifying if you're trying to achieve something specific. So for me, it adds this like higher potential for serendipitous something, like Kyle talk about, what was the phrase we used that one time, like the surface area for serendipity, right? Like having the water here increases the surface area for serendipity.
Love that.
If you're willing to like accept it and play with it. But I also find myself thinking like, I'm enjoying this, of course, because I have no expectations and I didn't set out to draw a picture of a tree or a boat. I set out to just fuck around and finger paint, metaphorically. But if I was in a situation where I have to create a likeness of something or achieve something specific, I have to achieve a desired effect, and I have to work with water and watercolors, I would be a lot more stressed, and the uncertainty of it would no longer be this like serendipitous, whatever happens has this cool chance to be something neat that me and the water created together. I'd be a lot more like, oh God, like if my mortgage payment depends on my ability to turn these watercolors into something somebody would buy. So there I am playing in the metaphors, but the presence of the water in this is so interesting because it does both drive home that if you have the ability to understand that things are never black and white, things aren't linear, things are always going to be a little bit completely out of your direct control and reach, that if you can learn to dance and sense and respond, that it like a lot of wonderful things can happen. But it also is a reminder to me to have some level of compassion, whether for me or others, maybe give a little grace, because there are a lot of parts of the world where you still have to figure out how to work with unpredictable water and paper and pigments and make it look like a boat.
Yeah.
That would be scary and uncomfortable to me. Actually, right here, if we were doing it, I'd be like, here's my abstract boat. And you all can take it or leave it. But, metaphorically speaking, I can see how that adds a layer of something to all of this.
And again, this isn't like a direct response to that in terms of like, it's not going to answer anything that you're saying. But what comes up for me about the drawing a boat or a face or whatever it is on fruit, it's a practice, right? So as you said, water isn't like there are rules of physics that are happening here. So when you are tipping it, but it won't go where you want it to, like there's a meniscus, there's like all those kind of like surface area, blah, blah. How do you, so you develop that, in my way of understanding it, is you develop a relationship with these materials and you understand that this will be different if you did use a different brush. And some people will look at my work and go, oh, how do I do that? And I'm like, number one, practice. Number two, I've got a completely different brush that has a completely different relationship with water. Number three, it's me. Like, I think I'm part of it. I will always have a different brush stroke. All those sorts of things come into play. But over time, you will get to know and develop that right relationship with the water, the pigment, the paper, whatever, and know how to do a face and know how to do a etc. So you become able to, as you said, not so much master it, but for me, it's like, what if we reframe that as actually being in a different relationship with those elements?
I really think that's important. Like, that's really is a really articulate reframe that I think is just, I'm really glad you said it the way you did, because it also makes me think of the concept of apprenticeship. Because if I was having that moment, again, metaphorically, and I would be like, yeah, I'd love to have the luxury of just flowing, but I gotta accomplish some metric in my job, or I gotta do a thing somewhere, and therefore I gotta make this look like a boat, and I don't know how to do that. There are people who have figured out how. You could learn from them. someone has figured out some way that you could learn from what they've figured out to do what you want to try to achieve. There is the potential for analysis or expertise to like serve the process, but even more than that, the apprenticeship with the materials. You know what I mean? Like not with the master, but like the materials are, you're the apprentice to them. So that's all. When you were just everything you just said, that's kind of what came to mind for me.
Yeah, I think there's a bit about honouring what watercolour does as well, and not trying to make it into an acrylic paint. If you want a certain thing, use different tools.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's also the output. So
how are you going with your output?
well, so first that relationship, I have to stop saying this is the thing I made, and I have to start to consider this is the thing we made, the water and I.
love
but
that.
Also, like, output wise, this is the first thing that I did, and I didn't really notice until the second thing that I put together that I've got this 3 thing going on, which is probably somewhat related, like started with these hard edges and moved into this more interlocking sort of thing, and I was just kind of letting the brush go and was trying to, I figured if Jackson Pollock can just throw paint around, I can probably do that too. And so what does that actually look like if I just go kind of, what is it, autonomic? Is that how he described his work? So there's something in that too, that this is a point in time, there's a context that's embedded in that, and just looking at that afterwards and thinking about it now, but coming back to it like a week from now also, I think would be really interesting to say, why did I don't know, now that I've had some time to sit with it, or now that I'm disassociated with it for a few minutes, what does this actually look like?
Yeah, can we talk for another 4 hours about time? That would just make my day. I know you need to go to sleep at some stage, but like the pigment and the water will change over time. And then if you come back to those and try and reanimate the pigments, watercolor technically, like that's the difference between watercolor and gouache. The watercolor will reactivate and that sort of thing with water, but you know, it depends on how it's bound to the paper and all those, you know, all those elements and things, but it will change over time, and people will often come back to it after 10 minutes. Like people will churn through heaps of these in their sessions with me, but they'll come back to something and they'll notice how it changes. Or if you have like these granulated watercolors that have like a few colors in it that dissolve differently, like that brings a whole other layer, and you come back to that and then you can play with it differently once it's dried. Once the colors have kind of settled, they're going to be totally different from what you saw in that palette, as you say, Kyle. The whole time part of it is something that I'm really fascinated by as well. Hence the pause, like actually slowing down time.
What's the face people make when they say, I want to talk about decolonality, and you say, excellent, grab a brush and some water. What is that reaction? Like, how does that go down?
Are they coming to me and saying that, or am I saying that to them?
I don't know. How does that conversation go? Because I can see there are circles that I'm in that if I said that sort of thing, or if I said we're gonna have a drum circle, go bring your bongos, like there would be a group of people that would be like, yes, I'm in all day.
You always use the drum circle, Kyle. I feel like maybe
I'm from Woodstock. There was like the eternal
maybe you need
drum
to lighten
circle
up on
right in the
drum
middle of
circle.
town.
Give it a break.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Did you participate in one?
Yeah,
Were you in the drum circle?
I've been in drum circles before. It goes two ways for me. It's either absolutely obnoxious because it just can't find its tempo, or there's somebody trying to do a thing, or everybody is trying to like figure it out but not listen. But I've also been in ones that are absolutely hypnotic, where like I don't know how long we were in that garage or that space doing that thing, but it just went on and on and on and on, and it was just freeing at the same time. Where there was, not being conscious of that time was also not being conscious of so many other things, but being conscious to things that I'm not typically conscious to as well, that kept me in that rhythm, and that had that, my hands had sort of brains of their own almost. Was sort of the feeling of how tempo sort of overtakes you. So yeah, it's. I think there would be like when I was asking before about whether or not you brought watercolor to your practice, or if the practice introduced you to watercolor. What I see is this not replicating itself, but this having there being a through line, that's the right way to say it, between other practitioners bringing something of their own, where I might say, we're going to jam and make some music, or Jen, you bring hockey or and snowboarding into it. We're all going to go snowboarding, and this is what it's going to look like.
Make me to be the jock, man. Come on, let me be an art kid for a minute too.
All right.
Anything that's like embodied and getting your body into it, I'm really interested in.
I know, I'm just joking. I also didn't become a jock until I was in the 20s, so it's fine. I was a nerd before then. Yeah.
I was genuinely curious about that, Kyle. Thank you, because I've never been part of one, but I know that the like singing and being part of, singing practices and anything that's kind of embodied is, and also I feel like since the pandemic I haven't really danced. I'm just going to tell everyone that. I've had a few moments, but I do feel it as a missing practice, and I think that there's something to that. So I'm just generally curious about that. But going back to your question about talking about decolonization, is that, I mean, my work and my practice is generally working in community-based organizations and in community with people, so I never use the word. And there are so many words like co-design and PD we mentioned before, and lots of different words that I use that, or lots of practices that I'm aware of that I don't use the word because I care more about the principles or the practice underlying it. So as words go in and out of favor, it's it's really funny. As words go in and out of favor, I'm like, yep, that's fine. Like, you can change the packaging on it, but why do I hold true to the thing underlying it? And so with decolonization, what I'm trying to explore at the moment is, why do I have particular beliefs and values held in my body that make me upset about how design is practiced? And, for years I've looked at, literature and practices of, Black American, Audre Lorde, etc. Like, that stuff can't not be incredibly powerful over here. Indigenous communities here, but also I've travelled to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Canada, and kind of trying to connect with what that means for people over there. And so there's a resonance that those communities have with what I believe, but they're not my communities. And so at the moment I'm really trying to figure out, what is it that I believe in innately. I might not ever be able to know why, but I can explore the story of my parents being migrants from a colonised place, Sri Lanka, all those sorts of things. I can't tie them up in neat bows, right? But I can explore them and go, why do I believe in these core ways of being? What does relationality mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Like sitting in a research practice with somebody where I go, this is what extraction kind of feels like, to be either extracted from or extracting, and go, how do I notice that, and then shift my decisions accordingly. All of that is kind of swimming in there somewhere, but I wouldn't really say this is a decolonized practice. And definitely there are some. Exactly. Definitely there are some places, and I work. I'm in a university, so obviously I kind of have to talk about that. But yeah, it's kind of like, what are the underlying ways that we show up? Why might people, or even just what do we swim in, right? Like, at the end of the day, I'm happy to just kind of go, are you aware that these things are constructs? And how do you feel about that? And you can decide. But are you aware that it's a construct and there are other ways of being?
Yeah. I mean, I have to imagine, there's, Kyle, we've talked a little bit about semiotics, just non-text, non-verbal, non-language based representations of meaning, right? And I think it's probably growing in interest, I think, for some folks in different forms of sense-making communities. So this is kind of, I don't know, in a way, like kind of well-timed in relation to some of those conversations, the discourse that I am noticing, because I think people are quick when they want to move into verbal, get outside of the tyranny of explicit. They're quick to think of symbols. They're quick to want to use imagery. It may be sometimes more efficient or maybe convenient or maybe acceptable to the participants to work with existing symbols or to do like collaging or something virtual where you know you're marking something where you feel you are on given days or whatever it is. So this just feels to me like it's in some ways also, I don't know, a step beyond that in a good way, where it's less of maybe choosing from the menu, even if it is still nonverbal, choosing from the menu of where you're at or what you're feeling or making the meaning, and rather folks can actually like create, or especially if you're in groups together, co-create what something means to them. It's just a nice entry into the conversation that I am noticing that is happening around getting people to communicate about meaning in non-verbal, non-overly flattened, explicit ways. That's all. Just put that out there. Can we put this in a sticker survey? Have some do a watercolor and then take a picture of it and then signify it?
Yeah, that's something they did a long time ago. They had these abstract images, and you'd say,
That's kind of partly what I was thinking about.
Yeah, but let's make our own, and then like, this is what this conversation is like for me. All right, now let's engage that.
Yeah, and then when people talk about it, not in a tell me why, or explain to me what that brown mark means, or please give me the Rosetta Stone code, like what's the decoder ring for your choice of stroke and color and placement. Like, that's not it. Like, we're not decoding, I think that's key. We're not decoding.
Yeah, and something I'm really aware of is the line between what I do in art therapy, and it's not a line. So I'm very aware of that and working with other people around that, and what does it mean to be trauma informed, and part of the not knowing is not knowing what it will bring up for people, even though it is kind of generally low stakes. But there's a lot of like, how does this bump up against other practices as well? So there's definitely something I'm aware of, but I can't say that I'm 100% ever going to be across that completely. Yeah.
I had like 4 different places I wanted to run real quick. And I was just listening and lost it all.
Did you stop painting? That's why. You should have been painting.
That's exactly what happened. I was still listening, but I did stop painting.
But there is a point, like it goes up and down, and you notice when you need to stop painting, and also in a workshop when there's just like 5 minutes of silence. Less likely to happen in a podcast, but there was a moment there about 2 minutes ago where I'm like, that would actually be a good moment for us to just either sit or paint or whatever it was, but
right.
It kind of keeps rolling because of the format, but part of that is the way that the dance that you talked about, Kyle, the dance is also with time and silence and all those things as well.
Yeah. I'll admit, there was a symposium at University of Virginia in December, maybe November, on somatic sense making. It was like 3 full days of just that. And I looked through it and I didn't recognize any of the names. And it seemed like every other event within those 3 days had something to do with meditation or yoga or something like this. And I looked at it and went, I'm never going to get anybody to like, I'm working right now. I'm going to have to explain why I'm taking the time off. And if I want to get somebody to pay for this, like as a work trip, I'm going to have to explain this in some funny way. And if I just do it personally, I might find it interesting, but I'm actually not really compelled to look any closer at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of kicking myself for not giving it a shot. And I've felt that way for a few months now, where I don't know that I would necessarily say, okay, like I'm ready to dive into a lot of those practices necessarily, but I have a curiosity at this point, because I'm starting my time spent with the warm data folks, and the in the bioaccumulate circle. I mean, we did one breakout where it was, you don't have to talk to anybody. We're just going to take 5 minutes and we're going to get on a Zoom call and have these 3 windows in front of us. And it went on for like 5 minutes where we just kind of stared at each other. And that was actually really nice. There was we then kind of talked about it a little bit afterwards. And it was an experience I hadn't had before. Nobody's ever like conducted that sort of thing. And so there was a different level of noticing. And that's what I'm always looking for, is what is that other level of noticing, and how do we get there, and how do we make the space for that?
Yeah, I mean, I also think there's something around timing. That's kind of how I look at the world, in terms of it might have been the wrong time for you. Mm-hmm. Not just to do it, but also to have that conversation with your bosses as well. Whereas now it might be different, or there might be a different way in that's more, I don't know, like a Kyle entry door. But I do think there is something around, like, I'm very aware of the nervous system aspects of this. And looking at things as whole of body rather than, and even like the spiritual stuff, trying to figure out what the Leander door to that is, because, you know, like in terms of my background, but also sitting in Indigenous communities, and that there's an element there that is really interesting to me, and my work around felt knowledge and embodied knowledge. And again, I don't want to draw like a triangle and make it really kind of clear and easy about how these things come together, but I want to hold space for that somewhere. But it needs to be right for me, and not, it's like, even like with these marks, like when you see other people doing it in real space, people are often trying to go, oh, how do I do that? And I'm going to try and copy that mark, but it just doesn't feel authentic. Yeah. But you might learn or be influenced by someone. And I've watched people use kind of flat brushes in a way that makes me go, I'm going to play with that and find a mark that's authentic for me. So if I hadn't been exposed to that, I wouldn't do that. But if I tried to copy them, it wouldn't feel right. So just trying to kind of play around and dance around with all of those things is something that I'm also thinking about in terms of the somatic as well.
Yeah, and the exposure to it, right? Rather than having it be something you necessarily want to copy and reproduce, but just the exposure to seeing that difference can spark something. You know, and listening to, as you were talking about, Kyle, I'm the same way, in that I almost feel like there's probably some level of irony in that I do hold at arm's length, or maybe just have no interest in participating in a lot of group embodied practices, which like people who know me in certain context will be like, oh my God, yeah, Jen, I could never see you going to that symposium that Kyle just mentioned, or you would roll your eyes so hard they'd fall out of your head, which is probably true. Yet, if you like take stock of the various other things I do with myself, it's a hell of a lot of embodied practices, from, yes, some of the sports, to literal dance, aerial and pole dance, to yoga, to other things. And I have kind of been asking myself over the course of even this hour, you know, why, like, this is really comfortable. I'm in my house, I'm by myself with you guys just on a screen. But because I'm doing this, and it's like me and the paper, and yes, this is happening, and yes, this is enriching it. The facilitation is holding space for it, or creating a container for it, or whatever you want to go with. But like, at the end of the day, like, screw you guys. Like, this was me and the paper, and me and the brush and the water and the color and stuff, right? So, did you have a role to play? Of course. Like, we all created this together. We're all entangled. This is simply the coalescence of all of us together right now in the history of the universe coming out in my paper, right? Yeah, got it. But at the same time, this is me, and like, this is my fucking painting, and not like ownership, but it was mine and me, and I was allowed to be there on my own. And in group settings is where I really struggle, because I want connection but not belonging, and I have figured that out about myself, is that like, I don't. So it makes me think about this practice with other people who are like me in that way, or who would say similar things. I think back to some of the co-design I've done over the years with different groups, and the people who are on paper maybe the most likely to be reluctant or skeptical or too cool to touch something and just want to sit with their arms crossed. And like, they're always my favorites. They're my favorites. And not because I always come out with some story about how I got some guy in a suit to finally warm up and play with a toy, because you don't always. I have had people who just choose not to engage, and that's fine. But there's just a sort of, there's a side to this that it always kind of sparks for me, which is simply just thinking about and asking and trying to understand more about that part of myself, because what does that illuminate for me about the other people that I'm trying to work with who would never go to that symposium, Kyle, who would never actually even show up to a thing like this if they had to be doing it in a room with other people, and I wouldn't have a problem doing this around other people out of fear for them seeing what I'm making or being like, oh my God, I'd be embarrassed. I'm like, no, it's just like, I don't get anything extra out of it. And then having to like negotiate rules and boundaries and the self-organization piece of it might be interesting and reveal some things, but it would also then in some ways take away from this individual experience. So, like I said, there's no conclusion there. There's not even a question there. But as someone who is an admittedly, I don't even know what the word would be, but I'm not going to do a drum circle. I'll have a drum circle by myself on my own drum set in my basement. It's a drum
That's
circle.
That's not a circle.
One. It's a drum circle
dot.
one. It's me and every person that I've ever learned from. It's every person I've ever listened to, I've ever learned from, I've ever interacted with, who I've ever watched, I've ever been inspired by, all of them with me in spirit by myself.
But I think being in relationship with all those other people that aren't physically there, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Of course.
It is to me. I don't think Kyle buys it. Also, really fast interruption though. I don't know if you guys can see, which is why I keep looking out my window. Can you see the shade on that shade right there? It is insane right now. The sun is setting and it is just beautiful. Like beautiful. I can't really show you because of the way that I can't like move, but there is some serious watercolor happening out there right now. Like that is the color of the sky, that pink. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I did lose my thread, but that's okay. But
Drum
it was just
circles, groups.
Oh, it's about kind of like so this practice, I didn't really expect to be doing it as long as I've been doing it with people. It's just people keep showing up and I keep seeing a reason to, gift it. But at the beginning, there was definitely this idea of I'm going to show you my experience of it. I want you to participate just because that's just, I'm never going to just teach you something. I'm going to hold space for something. But for those people that experience something, what else in your life reminds you of this that you might explore? So it was never, I mean, people keep going, oh, I'm going to go out and buy watercolors. I'm like, you do that if you want, but that's never the point. Yeah, exactly. I should be selling them or something. But that has interested me that people are picking up on this practice, but it was never about this practice. It was very much about, is it hiking? Is it, I don't know, like, is it swimming? Is it all these other things that it could be? Does it add a different layer of awareness or something to your practice? Or does it show that you don't have this response or connection to something in your daily life that makes you feel like this? And gosh, how easy is it to do this?
Since making through synchronized swimming, I like this. Or somebody's gonna have to try this.
Or individual swimming, or open water swimming. Jesus, Kyle.
You gotta admit, there's another thing that, like, I watch my kids try to work on the same artwork every once in a while, and when I hear that that's happening, I say, well, this is a time bomb. I'm gonna have to interject at some point, and that happens about half the time. Sometimes they're both doing things on the same page and they're complementing each other in ways that are surprising me. And then there are other times when, one of them throws some red spiky hair on the horse that wasn't supposed to be there and somebody has a temper tantrum and loses their mind. But like, these are all good lessons. Like I want to let that happen all on its own and take a couple steps back and just watch it. And I can imagine, like, my wife is was the chief of staff for a long time, and she's kind of said, like, I've been prepared for toddlers having to work with executives. Her job is more making executives look professional, and I can see that same sort of thing happening with anybody walking in the room. Where you and I, Jen, on the same piece of paper, one of us looking at the other and going, "What the fuck did you just do to my?" I was like, I was working on something there.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of power and magic and richness, goodness potential in the interactions and the navigating / negotiating / litigating overlaps and boundaries. Like that stuff is, I'm not like a lone wolf. I was never a kid who was like, I only ever want to work by myself. I was not, that's kind of not, that's not the angle on it for me, is so much as, because most of my work is exactly that, right? Most of my actual 9 to 5 work is that. And a lot of my outside of 9 to 5 participation in certain communities and activities is self-organizing, very much like what, Leander, you were describing when people were like, we need some rules, and you were like, okay, well, and then people made up the rule, like that. That's a great metaphor for a lot of what I do outside of work, not just with work. But for me, it's the not universal, but not uncommon experience that when you're doing something embodied, that it sometimes becomes really important that you are seeing and being seen by everyone else in a way that is not always productive for me, or interesting to me, or useful, or validating, or blah, 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 blah. And there's also an intimacy to anything embodied. I mean, I was just painting with watercolors, but there's like, this is me and mine, and an extension of my body. And I don't want to share that with everybody. I don't know if I want to share it with strangers. There are certain things I will and certain things I won't. This I would, but, I think that there is a different calculus for how much is too intimate for every individual. And there's probably a whole group of individuals out there for whom doing anything embodied in the company of other humans that they don't already know well is above the threshold for what they're willing to share with other humans. And that entire group of humans, I think, misses out a little bit on certain practices that maybe can't see and understand that it's not that they're not interested or willing. It's that the threshold for too intimate versus not is different for them. So they might not be stupid hippies in the drum circle. That might not be their attitude. It might simply be that being part of a drum circle feels far too intimate. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's interesting to think about what you do when you actually have no way to know. It's not yours to know other people and how that calculus is working out for them. And I think, Leander, I mean, what you've described is like, this is doing like the work of making it safe for it to be whatever it is. You're not forcing anything. So I wish more people would think about that in other contexts. We'll put it that way.
I mean, what you just said makes complete sense to me. Complete and utter sense to me. And I mean, I'm an introvert, so I would not have done this podcast 3 years ago. There's been a level of practice to lead up to this. But also, Kyle, we had a chat a few months ago, which changes the relationship and, all that sort of stuff. But no, Jen, what you just said makes complete sense to me. And there are a lot of things that, it's not just I wouldn't do it and that there's a threshold, but it changes the experience and the relationship with the thing to also be in relationship with physical bodies. And I think even like the simplest metaphor that came to mind for me was, if I'm driving, I love driving, but if I'm driving with a car in my rear view, it changes how I drive. Like, it just does. Mm-hmm. And I've never really thought about it much more deeply than that, other than that is the case. But yeah, the enjoyment of driving without somebody just noticing me changes the actual act of it. So I completely get that.
When we're getting close to time, but it is, I think that's such a good metaphor. And it is ironic to me that we, talk a little bit about this practice as being partly one of noticing, of cultivating and building up some level of noticing, individually and shared. And then at the same point, talking about how sometimes I don't want to be noticed. So how do you reconcile those, man, right? Isn't that the fun cognitive dissonance of all this? Like, don't perceive me, but also please see me. I want to be seen. Do not look at me, and like that very human experience, then spread out across everything. So anyway, with that, I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, Kyle, and then of course, Leander, if there's anything you want to say, I guess we can start to wrap. But we like to give folks just the last word, so to speak. I have to say on my behalf, this was really very cool. Also, I didn't even show you. I've still got a kind of pool of water on the corner of mine, but I'll sort of.
And this becomes bookmarks for Christmas presents for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Right.
I thought it was funny, too, that I just wanted to work on one the whole time. And Kyle, what'd you make, like three 3 or 4. At some point, I was
My
like,
instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time was I need to fill the page, and I started getting aggressive about that. And then I started thinking, what happens if I just find myself done before
I was
that?
like, I don't want to fill the page. I just want to stay with these colors. In fact, at some point, I was like, no, I want to make sure I leave that part blank. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I've got a lot of different directions I want to go, but not in any of not in the spirit of closing. But yeah, I didn't know what to expect. My first reaction when we first started this was I wouldn't be able to facilitate this because this is just not me, and I wouldn't be particularly genuine. But at the same time, as we went through it, I was like, this isn't just low stakes for people participating. As a facilitator, this is incredibly low stakes to just say, doodle with this as your medium instead. I have no problem saying doodle on sticky notes with Sharpies. I can arrange a doodling with this. This is really accessible. But it is also making me think of what does that look like with other things that are more me,
Yes.
and how do I don't know what
You need to give everybody a different instrument.
Yeah, and
They're all gonna be drums.
Einstürzende
They're all gonna be
Neubauten. Yes. Well, Einstürzende Neubauten is coming to mind, where they just kind of they were a drum circle, but they used old industrial materials. So they were using metal drums and wheelbarrows and drills and that kind of stuff because they wanted it to feel like East Berlin, where they came from, and it was like this post-industrial wreckage. Anyway, this has been really eye-opening. So thank you. This has been amazing.
Thank you both just for going with this because, as I said, I'm a whole lot more uncomfortable if this was just a let's do an interview, but doing it with the materials just shifts things for me. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for that, and yeah, I look forward to receiving your Christmas cards with hand-painted watercolors and Santas once you go to figurative works as well. But yeah, thank you both so much.
Yeah.
It'll be an abstract Santa, but yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, maybe anybody who's watched this, go get your own watercolor kit, make some stuff, and send it our way.
I regret not opening with, hey, hit pause and go get your watercolors and paint with us. So
go back and watch
listen
it
to this again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hit the rewind button.
Very,
and get
very cool.
Your stuff.
All right. Well, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you, guys.